Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, today we're going to dive back into Chill Dude Explains. This one caught my attention. It's the most unsettling things archaeologists wish they had never found. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, not knowing exactly what is going to be covered in this video, and say that what tends to unsettle us is the unknown, right? It's not understanding things completely, or sometimes it's fully understanding it and just knowing that it's just a really awful thing that happened in history. So I'm guessing there'll probably be a mix of that in this. Some things that are just horrific and some things that are just, wow, it seems like it could be horrific because we have no idea how this happened. But either way, we'll put the link down in the description so you can check it out without my commentary. You can see all of Chill Dude Explains' other content. I want to thank Austin in Evansville, Indiana, my old stomping grounds. I used to live in Gibson County, not too far from there. Austin is our latest executive producer level patron. Austin, your name will be appearing at the end in the credits in this video and in all future videos. Thanks so much. Let's dive in.
Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Headless Vikings of Dorset. In 2009, construction workers in Dorset, England, found a pit containing 54 headless skeletons. All were young men. Their heads were found nearby, stacked in a separate pile. Scientists determined these were Viking raiders from Scandinavia, killed between 890 and 1030 AD. The cuts on their neck vertebrae were clean, but not from a single blow. These weren't battlefield wounds. This was an organized execution.
I'm guessing if you searched all over England or a whole lot of other places, you would find multiple examples of this. Examples of it done by Viking raiders, examples done by the English, examples done by the Romans, examples done by the Picts, examples done by you name it. This might be portrayed as being unsettling, but I think this is kind of par for the course for a lot of history.
One had lined these men up, one by one, and taken their heads off from the front, meaning the Vikings faced their executioners. It took multiple strikes per person, making the process slow and deliberate. Imagine being Viking number 47 in that line, watching 46 of your comrades die before you. The most unsettling part isn't the execution, but the tidiness. The bodies were arranged carefully, the heads stacked neatly. The killers were organized, calm, and methodical. We still don't know if they were Anglo-Saxon locals or soldiers, but their cold-blooded efficiency is what makes this discovery so terrifying.
So this is all during that time that's portrayed in The Last Kingdom, that series that has been on Netflix, and Vikings, another TV show. It's a fascinating time in history, and obviously we have mythologized it quite a bit, but it was a brutal time to be alive, and you were fighting literally for your lives, but also for control of these kingdoms. Kingdoms like Wessex, which is where this area would have taken place. Well, this is Dorset. Let's take a look at the map and see what we're talking about. Yeah, I double-checked. It's right in the heart of what would have been Anglo-Saxon Wessex. So we're talking about, right in the middle of some of the most violent part of English history.
Number 9. The Clad Hallen Frankenstein Mummies. At the Bronze Age site of Clad Hallen in Scotland, archaeologists found 2 mummies under the floor of an ancient house. But these weren't ordinary remains. The mummies were composites, made from the parts of different people stitched together. The male mummy was assembled from at least 3 different men. The female mummy was also a patchwork of remains from people who likely never met. This wasn't an accident. The bones were carefully selected and arranged. Scientists believe the bodies were first preserved in a peat bog before being assembled and buried.
So if you haven't already, you go to somewhere like Ireland, you can go to, there's a museum in Dublin where they actually have some of these bodies that were pulled from peat bogs on display. There's something about the material in these peat bogs that would very well preserve these bodies. And so there's a lot they can learn and a lot that you can see about these thousands of year old bodies in some cases, and I think they probably understood that by this time.
The leading theory is that these composite mummies were created to combine the identities or ancestral claims of multiple people into a single powerful entity. Perhaps it was a way to secure land rights or keep multiple bloodlines alive in a ritualistic sense.
So this is this goes to a great point where we're speculating about the reasons why people would have done this. And the truth is, there are so many civilizations throughout history that we just don't know much about because they didn't write things down. Or if they did write things down, they only wrote a little bit down, or most of it was lost. I mean, we're still learning things about the Roman Empire that we didn't know. And the Roman Empire is one of the most well-documented empires in history. I mean, just hiking Hadrian's Wall, we got to learn about the the inscriptions that they found, these incredible like postcard type things that they found that gave us insight into Roman Britain that we otherwise would not have known. Just think about how much history there is out there that we could yet discover if we found something like that for a civilization like this. This is one of those examples of something that it's horrifying because we just don't understand it.
Think about it. Someone dug up several ancestors, built a new person out of them, and then buried that person under their living room floor. The archaeologists who found them called it one of the most unsettling discoveries in British prehistory. Number 8. The Vampire of Venice. In 2006, archaeologists excavating a mass plague grave on the Venetian island of Lazaretto Nuovo found a female skull with a brick jammed in its mouth. It wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately forced it there long after her death. This was the work of medieval vampire hunters, not heroes, but terrified gravediggers who believed the dead were spreading the plague. During epidemics, mass graves were constantly reopened. Gravediggers would see corpses that were bloated, with blood around the mouth, normal signs of decomposition they didn't understand.
So, look at modern times. Look at how much we understand about science and biology and those things. And yet, look at how often people speculate or have conspiracy theories about things that they don't understand, even though science might understand it. Now, go back hundreds of years when we understood far less. And it's, we might look at this and laugh and think, come on, they really thought it was vampires. But when you put yourself in that time period with the knowledge that they had of biology, of how disease works and things like that, or the lack thereof as far as knowledge goes, it's not that big of a stretch to think that large groups of people might have attributed this to something like vampires.
He saw a dead person who looked suspiciously alive and believed it was a shroud eater crawling out at night to feed on the living. Their solution was to shove a brick in the corpse's mouth. No feeding. The woman was elderly, likely a victim of the 1576 plague that killed a third of Venice's population. People were desperate for an explanation.
Yeah, you're scared, you're desperate, you can't stop it, and a third of all the people have died. And this is hardly the first time this has happened. You go back to the 1300s and you had that great plague that maybe killed upwards of half of Europe's population. You're willing to try just about anything if you think it might help.
For any sense of control, what's unsettling isn't the vampire myth, but the human reality. In the midst of a horrifying epidemic, panicked people dug up a dead woman and shoved a brick in her mouth just in case. Number 7. The Herculaneum Ring of Death. When Vesuvius erupted, the people of Herculaneum fled to stone boat sheds on the beach, hoping the sea would save them. It didn't. A pyroclastic surge, a wave of superheated gas around 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hit them in seconds. When archaeologists found the remains, they discovered the skulls had exploded from the inside. The intense, sudden heat didn't just burn the brain tissue, it vaporized it as it...
So, Herculaneum's actually much closer to Mount Vesuvius than the much more famous Pompeii is. Pompeii is further to the south. Herculaneum's right up nestled against it. I'm hoping to get back there and visit sometime because Pompeii is one of the most incredible sights I've ever seen, and I really want to visit Herculaneum as well. But being that close, they got hit first by that pyroclastic flow, which is just... it seems horrific, but it would have been really fast. I mean, they probably didn't feel much. It would have killed them so quickly.
Cooled instantly, it turned into a black, glassy material. This process, called vitrification, had never been seen in a human brain before. Scientists were looking at people's last thoughts, frozen in glass. Inside this vitrified material, they found preserved brain proteins, locked in the glass for nearly 2,000 years.
Wow.
Near the remains of one young man, they found a carbonized wooden bed, and on that bed was a ring. It had survived the heat, the eruption, and the centuries. Engraved on it was a tiny figure of a woman. In his final moments, his brain turning to glass, he was wearing a ring with someone's face on it. Number 6. The Mayan death whistles. For decades, small, skull-shaped clay objects found in Mayan burial burial sites, sat in museum storage, mislabeled as...
I'll admit that some of the pre-Columbian American tribes and people groups, you want to talk about stuff that disturbs me? Yeah, a lot of it comes from them.
Toys or trinkets. In the 1990s, a researcher finally blew into one. The sound that came out was not a whistle. It was a scream, a full, blood-curdling, human-sounding shriek. The Mayans had engineered these whistles specifically to produce that sound. Audio analysis shows the frequency closely matches a human shriek of terror. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference. It's a hardwired jump scare. These whistles weren't found in temples. They were found clutched in the hands of skeletons. The leading theory is that Mayan warriors blew them en masse before battle.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, you look at the different cultures and what they do to inflict fear on the enemy before the battle even happens, because they understood that psychological warfare was a part of, the American Civil War. You had the rebel yell. I mean, this seems like the perfect kind of thing to do to inflict terror on your opponent. Okay, so I had to take a minute because I felt like in order to really understand this, we needed to hear it ourselves. Turns out, despite the fact that it's referred to in the video as a Mayan death whistle, and it does seem like sometimes it's referred to that way, it's apparently more properly called an Aztec death whistle. It's more associated with the Aztecs, but we're going to listen to one. I found this video. I haven't heard it yet. Dude, what? Oh my gosh, that imagine a bunch of those going on. Oh, wow. Okay, let's just watch one more here. This one says it's got the correct death whistle technique.
Ahora otra vez.
Okay. Well, that'll haunt me in my dreams.
Imagine an army charging at you, accompanied by the sound of hundreds of simultaneous screams. You wouldn't feel like you were fighting soldiers. You'd feel like you were being attacked by a nightmare. Some researchers also believe they were used in rituals to communicate with the underworld. Number 5, the Aztec Skull Tower. In 2000,
see what I mean? I mean, the pre-Columbian Native Americans, just terrifying stuff.
During construction in Mexico City, workers unearthed a tower made entirely of human skulls. Archaeologists have since uncovered over 600 skulls cemented together into a cylindrical structure.
Listen, to be fair, I'm picking on the pre-Columbian Native Americans here, but listen, we got the Bone Church out in Kutna Hora, outside of Prague in the Czech Republic. We've got millions of bones stacked in displays beneath Paris in the catacombs I've walked through. This is not a unique thing.
Believe the full tower, known as a Tzompantli, once contained as many as 100,000 skulls. This was a public display rack for the heads of sacrificial victims. Think of it as a trophy case the size of a building. While they expected to find the skulls of male warriors, they also found many belonging to women and children. This wasn't just about war. The Aztecs were sacrificing their own people. Holes were drilled into the sides of the skulls so they could be threaded onto wooden poles before being plastered into the tower, all facing outward, as if watching the city. For the Aztecs, this wasn't horrifying. It was sacred. The sacrifices were believed to feed the sun god and keep the world from ending. In their own minds, they were saving the world.
Right. I'm glad he pointed that out. It is horrific when you think about it, and we obviously would not tolerate such things now. But it was understood by their culture that this was something you did, and they didn't see it as just wanton murder. They saw it as appeasing the gods.
4. The finger-biting mummy. In Chile, an archaeologist examining a mummy from the ancient Chinchorro culture noticed something deeply disturbing. The mummy had its own finger bones inside its mouth, showing signs of being bitten through. The evidence points to one horrifying conclusion.
No.
This person was buried alive. The Chinchorro, who were mummifying their dead 2,000 years before the Egyptians, sometimes used natural substances to prepare bodies. Researchers believe this person may have been in a deep, death-like state of unconsciousness from illness or a given substance.
There are examples of this. I mean, embalming as we understand it in the modern sense, where you basically drain all the blood out of somebody and replace it with formaldehyde and embalming fluid, things like that. Relatively recent, 150 years ago, most bodies weren't being embalmed. Other than in these cultures where you had mummification going on, you didn't have a lot of embalming going on. So the chances that someone was buried alive, quite common, I'm sure. And by common, I don't mean like 1 out of 3 or something, but it was common enough that we find examples of it. And how many more examples are out there that we will never find because the people were never dug up?
They were dead, their community buried them. Then they woke up. Underground, in total darkness and panic, they did the only thing their survival instinct could drive them to do. They started chewing on their own fingers. The Chinchorro clearly cared for their dead, putting immense effort into mummification. The people who buried this person had no idea what they had done. They thought they were honoring a loved one who was alone, underground, with no way to tell them they were still alive. Number 3. The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls. 8,000 years ago in Sweden, someone stuck human skulls on wooden stakes and
Notice a common theme with some of these?
sank them to the bottom of a lake. We still don't know why. At a drained lake bed called Kanalljorden, researchers found the skulls, some still containing preserved brain tissue. One skull had fragments of another person's skull deliberately jammed inside it. This wasn't random violence. It was a careful, deliberate ritual. The jaws had been removed from some skulls, while others were placed with precision. The people who did this were hunter-gatherers, using stone tools, yet they performed this complex, eerie ritual. The skulls were arranged in a specific area, surrounded by animal bones, like an underwater display. The best guess for the skull within a skull is that it was meant to bind 2 people together after death.
Wow.
What we know for sure
Interesting.
is that 8,000 years ago, a group of people stood at a lakeside, carefully mounted human heads on stakes, lowered them into the water, and then went home. Number 2. The body in the iron coffin. In 2011, New York construction workers unearthed an iron coffin. Inside was a woman so perfectly preserved, she looked like she had died the previous week, not in the 19th century. Her skin, hair, and eyelashes were all intact. The airtight coffin had created a near-perfect vacuum.
So a lot of people have been buried in lead coffins over time. A great example from a historical figure where you have something like this happen is you have the body of James the First, who was, or not James the First, King Charles the First, the one who was executed. And they dig him up, and well, they didn't dig him up. They entered his burial location, the crypt that he was in, which happened to be right next to Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, and they opened it up and they broke that seal where it had been airtight and sealed for a long time, and his eyes were open. And they said you could actually still see his eyeballs and look into his eyes, but within a few seconds they just turned to dust, because as soon as all of that air hit, it was no longer sealed, it was no longer preserved.
They tested her. Inside her perfectly preserved cells, they found the genetic material of the variola virus, the virus that causes smallpox, a disease that killed 300 million people in the 20th century alone and was declared eradicated in 1980, was sitting in a coffin under Manhattan. Scientists had to use full hazmat protocols to handle the body. She was contained, but as permafrost in places like Siberia begins to thaw, it's releasing bodies that have been frozen for centuries, some carrying diseases our immune systems have forgotten.
That is a terrifying concept and 100% true. Wow.
2016, a 75-year-old reindeer carcass thawed and released anthrax, killing a child and sickening dozens. Scientists call these biological time bombs, ancient bodies melting out of the ice and releasing whatever they died from back into the world.
Cool.
Number 1. The Lulailako children. In 1999, on the summit of Mount Lulailako in Argentina, archaeologists found 3 Inca children. A 13-year-old girl and 2 younger children, around 4 or 5, were sitting as if they had just fallen asleep. They were perfectly preserved by the cold and had been there for 500 years. They were victims of an Inca ritual called capacocha. Chosen for the honor, children were treated like royalty, given the best food and clothes. Then, they were taken on a long journey to a high mountain peak and left to die as a sacrifice. Analysis of their bodies showed they had been drugged with coca leaves and alcohol for months, leading up to their deaths, with doses increasing as the final day approached. By the time they reached the summit, they were likely barely conscious. They were simply placed in a small chamber, where the cold 13-year-old did the rest. The 13-year-old, known as the Maiden, had the highest levels of drugs in her system. By analyzing her hair, scientists could read the timeline of her final year, seeing...
Incredible that we have the technology to be able to learn so much about this and to analyze these things in such a way. And honestly, I guess one way to look at this is the fact that they drugged them so much. It's still horrific that they were prepared for death, but I guess it could have been a whole lot worse than if they had not been drugged out of their minds.
The drugs appear and then spike dramatically in her final weeks. It's like a diary written in her body. The archaeologists who found them said nothing prepares you for finding 3 children who look like they could wake up at any moment. That's all for today.
All right, so I didn't show the image, but I did look up the images of those children. It is really remarkable how well preserved they are, and I can only imagine what it must have been like to first discover them. So check it out if you want. I mean, you just Google it. You can find the images pretty easily. I want to thank Jurgen and Obliquity. That's all I have to go by for your names. But thank you so much for your support on Patreon. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.